Why is the root collar or trunk flare so important? You know, it's easy to cover it up in the intense managed ecosystems, the yards that you're going to be invited into. Everyone likes uniformity and for everything to match up, and that's why they'll take this mulch and they'll pile it up over the anchor roots, and they'll pile it up next to the collar of the tree. They'll cover it and smother it. They will preclude water from getting into there, all for the sake of an aesthetic look. But that conflicts with what is required naturally by the tree. Now, one of the first major reasons that you want to expose this collar is so that you will be in compliance with ANSI standards. All right, let me give everybody a fill-in on what American National Standards Institute means to you as a business owner. The Z133 Safety Committee was started in 1968. It predates OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is a federal agency. And the most recent revision, all of the ANSI standards that I'm going to talk to you about have been revised and updated every 4 to 5 years. We have a series of A300 accredited committees that review these and take input from all parts of our industry in order to get a representative regulation. It's not a regulation, it's a guideline, a specification that you use for specifying jobs. And I'm going to make a distinction here. Everyone gets confused. OSHA has mandatory safety requirements. The Z133 standard of ANSI is now very much getting in step with the terminology and the requirements of the OSHA safety standards, and they are mandatory. However, ANSI standards are all voluntary, and the 10 parts that of the ANSI standards 1 through 10 are support that you can use to verify your jobs are supported with best practices and research throughout the industry over a long period of time. And so be familiar with ANSI. Don't look upon them as a restrictive or as a requirement that's going to be hard for you to comply with. These are specifications that you use to write jobs, and if you use these specifications, they will give you all of the support in excruciating details, and you can use them with your customers to give you the kind of credibility that will make you an expert. This is the kind of credibility you need when offering and providing new services. And so please use them. They are voluntary. They're not trying to jam these things down your throat. These are standards and guidelines for specifications and writing jobs. If you review them, they will give you ideas for jobs in everyone's designed ecosystem that you go to. Every yard that you visit has dozens of additional jobs that are specified with ANSI guidelines, parts 1 through 10. Some of them are new, some of them are well established. They're all easy to read. Use them and you will be the expert. That's all I'm going to dwell on it right now because we've got bigger fish to fry on the root collar excavation, but I promise these standards deserve to be learned, they deserve to be read, and they deserve to be referred to by you and your customers. And so get used to it because they are money in the bank and they will support everything that you do. Now, the second reason that the root collar excavation is so important, in addition to your ANSI compliance, is it has a lot to do with tree health, both biological and structural. Will that tree fall on me and will it survive to thrive are two questions that are most often asked to us by our property owners. And in order to answer those questions, we have to expose the root collar. What we found out is that the third reason is that the root collar excavation is a combination treatment and assessment. In order for you to do a proper assessment of whether this tree is safe or not, you have to be able to visually inspect the anchors. If they're covered and smothered, I'll go right back to my opening statement, it does not take a lot of ingenious training to figure out if you can't see the anchors. If you can't see the anchors, then insect and disease infestations are the next thing that you will encounter. All right, we've talked about three general categories: ANSI compliance, the tree health issues, and the combination treatment and assessment that must be associated with a root collar excavation in order to give it value for the homeowner. Now, what we do is relate all of that within the general context of what we refer to as the bad three tree and landscape risks. And those bad three risks are covered and smothered or mulch volcanoes that cover the root collar and do not allow us to see what condition that it's in. The second risk is over-competition in the critical root zone, and the critical root zone is determined by taking 5 times the diameter of your tree or other plant and putting a skirt around or a zone, what they refer to in ANSI as a tree protection zone, TPZ, a tree protection zone around each of the trees. And you'll find that many times in order for you to do a root collar excavation, you're going to have to transplant or move competitive plants that people, and maybe even you, in your lack of knowledge of how these plants unfairly compete with the larger trees above them, you're going to have to move those things out of the way so that you can expose the root collar. And then the third risk is bad advice, many times from so-called experts, quote unquote experts, that say they know what they're talking about. I usually reference all of my recommendations by the fact that I am a certified arborist. I have a license. It is renewed every several years through continuing education units, and if you have any licensing or other designations, they need to be brought up at this time in order to give you the kind of credibility in recommending action against these bad three tree risks. And so these bad three tree risks that I've referred to, mulch volcanoes, overcompetition in the critical root zone, and bad advice, can all be summed up very easily by calling them bad cultural practices. Many of these things, these actions, we are doing because everyone else is doing it. There's no basis in science. There's no logical progression of health in the landscape that we can see or determine. As a matter of fact, we'll show you as we go through this series how the landscape will cost additional money if these risks are, but they're bad cultural practices, and we got to snap people out of their little hypnotic trance because all of their neighbors are doing it or because everyone else in the community is doing it. You've got support through ANSI and all of the dozens of committees and people that support these actions, and you need to emphasize that so that there's no lost landscape values and there's no loss of maintenance and service money, cash flow that they have to lay out every month to cut the grass, trim the bushes, and safeguard the trees.